So, question 4. How can the evolutionary model be true with the Cambrian explosion? There was lots of life happening all at once, lots of change. To start with, this explosion lasted at an absolute minimum 5 million years. This is a conservative estimate. It was more likely towards the upwards of 40 million years. Although fairly quick on an evolutionary time scale, it was by no means as sudden as you make it out to be, and certainly not impossible in evolutionary science. Also, the evolution of predators, serious predators, just prior to the Cambrian period, this produced more prey animals that had hard shells. So we could actually just be seeing more fossils because the hard shells are preserved better. And we are probably actually seeing a more accurate representation of how many animals were around even before the Cambrian explosion. They were just preserved better. Cambrian explosion didn't apply to all life, didn't apply to all animal life, and it didn't apply to plant life at all. So this is more evidence that it was just due to very specific evolutionary causes, not due to any kind of intelligence behind it. And finally, right around this time, Hox genes, which control most of an animal's basic body plan, were likely first evolving right around this time, and development of these genes might have just then allowed the raw materials for body plans to diversify, which is what we see in the Cambrian explosion. As far as your last point in this question, where you talk about lists of people who disbelieve in evolution, large lists, I'd like to point out that the questions asked to form those lists are often very vague, such that they allow a staunch scientist, somebody who is very convinced of the theory of evolution based on the scientific evidence, can still possibly answer these questions towards the affirmative for the list, because the question is so vague. So before I'm able to really comment on this, I would request that I see the list and the question that produced the list, so we can discuss whether the question was really concerning intelligent design, or whether it was just a vague question about evolution, and then we can discuss that once I've seen that list. So on to question 5, I suppose. If there is no objective standard of right or wrong furnished by a creator, how can anything be wrong? Well, you are correct in saying that an atheistic, naturalistic worldview does not provide an absolute system of morality, nor does it provide accountability. But unfortunately, the unpleasantness of a proposal does not disprove that proposal. A proposal being unpleasant does not automatically mean that it is wrong. I can say, for instance, that I don't like the fact that lions hunt antelope. I can say that I think antelope are beautiful, graceful creatures, and they shouldn't have to die in vast numbers to feed the lions. Unfortunately, my human preference does not exert any impact on the nature of the universe outside what I can affect. There is indeed no such thing as absolute morality. There is no scientific evidence for something that is 100% concrete, absolute, right or wrong, black or white. There's no evidence of that, and anything that used to exist that looked like evidence for it has been explained by social psychology. We have a set of ways of behaving that are fairly common, that the majority of people behave in these ways, but the environment has an impact as well as our genes, and people behave differently. There's no absolute. This might be a hard truth, but I've seen no reason to suspect otherwise. I've seen no evidence of ultimate morality. Psychology as a scientific field provides explanations for human behavior that are accurate and predictive. Most importantly, they can predict future human behavior. For instance, as you pointed out in your metaphor, we feel it is wrong to murder human babies because that is how evolution has wired us up. It would be a severe detriment to our survival as a species if we thought it was okay to murder babies. Our sense of morality is a product of evolution, both biological and cultural, but it's certainly not a product of anything supernatural. It is simply not a survivable trait to have to want to murder babies, or to even think that it is right to murder babies. Morality is very adaptive in this environment. We need a sense of right and wrong, even if it's not absolute, and psychology has shown that we do have that sense. If we want meaning and morality in our lives, these wonderful brains that we have evolved, we have to use these brains to make meaning and morality for ourselves with the senses we've been given. This is my area of interest, social psychology, and I would be happy to continue this particular conversation on a different day. In any case, on to question 6, which is about matter coming into existence for no reason, how, which really this seems like a reiteration of question 2, but I'll just quickly go back into it, that our human measurement of time, our way of describing the universe is necessarily based in time, cause, effect, but that sort of space-time state outside the Big Bang, before, if we can be said to be using time, the laws of cause and effect were either non-existent or severely different, I'm sure. Things did not function in before and after cause and effect, so it's very difficult to say what it was. There's, again, no reason to fill in God here. We just may not be able to understand this. In this question, you also sort of said that things tend towards disorder, which is a bit of a misphrasing of the second law of thermodynamics. That law states, systems or processes left to themselves invariably tend to move from order to disorder. However, I would point out that the explosion of the Big Bang, that energy exploding outwards, provides sufficient energy from outside the system of the universe for things to change in a way that tend towards order instead. The energy is the reason the universe is constantly expanding, and most prominent scientists have posited that when the energy reaches its outermost limits, the universe will start collapsing back in on itself, probably producing another Big Bang after the universe has entirely collapsed. So here, you ask here what place preconceptions have in science. Well, none. God does not exactly have a place in science because the hypothesis that a God exists does nothing for science. Science doesn't particularly care whether God exists or not. It's kind of hands-off on the issue because God, if it is a hypothesis, does nothing for science. The purpose of a hypothesis is to account for previous data we have seen, which, with God in the gaps, people do attempt to do. But more importantly, and this is the key focus of science, a hypothesis has to predict future data. And the God hypothesis does not predict any future data that is not more easily predicted by a normal scientific theory. There's no use in saying God did it because this is not predictive of anything in the future. So, like I said, science as a field does not particularly care whether God exists or not because he is not affecting the universe in a way differently than normal scientific law and theory does.